Okay, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for some of you. Thank you for joining our webinar on Oracle Data Integrator in your Hyperion environment. So, my name is Brian Decker. I am an account executive here at Key Performance Ideas. This is not a sales presentation, so it's not a lot of marketing material. But what I would like to do is give you a little background on KPI before we jump into the presentation on ODI. We're a consulting firm that specializes in Oracle EPM Suite, and that EPM Suite, as you all know, is called Hyperion. Hyperion's all we do, and we're experts at it. All of our consultants are Hyperion certified. For example, the presenter, JJ Gutierrez, he's certified in both planning and in S-Base. We're also a certified partner with Oracle in a couple of different areas. We're a gold partner on the reseller side, so you'll see us listed as an Oracle partner as a Hyperion partner on the Oracle site, and it just means that we can sell all the Hyperion products, and we take place in all the partner events. We're Oracle Consulting Certified Services Partner, which just means that we subcontract to them. We're licensed to work underneath them in a subcontractor role, and we do that quite often as they're looking for experts. One of the things that you'll notice about our consultants is that they all have a blended background of finance and technology. This gives them that real-world understanding of what's going on in business and dealing with the business issues for our customers. As we go to the next slide, you'll see that I put up a small client list, giving you an idea of some of the companies that we're doing business with. You'll see that we deal with organizations of all sizes, from very small to very large. We can also handle projects from very small to very large. And one last point, before I turn this over to JJ, that I think is a big differentiator for KPI, is I'd like to talk just a minute about our SMART program, which is called the System Maintenance and Remote Troubleshooting Program that we have. It's a remote administrative service that we provide to our customers. I would assume that most people on the phone have Hyperion environment up and running currently, and there's probably somebody that's administering the system. It could be from IT, could be from finance, and from what we've seen, it's usually one person. All but the largest organizations usually have one person, and if this person ends up sick, leaves the company, goes on maternity leave, any number of things, organizations can end up with a system that nobody knows how to administer. That's exactly what this service is intended to do. It's to help organizations administer their Hyperion environment. We have dedicated resources based here in the United States. We have significantly lower than consulting rates. It's roughly half the price of consulting rates. They do, and it's to do the administrative functions that you need for your Hyperion environment. For example, making sure the reports are up and running data loads, kicking off jobs, doing maintenance, maintaining calc scripts, all those kinds of things. And like I said, I think that's one of the big differentiators that we have from our competition. And I wanted to bring it up before I turn this over to JJ. So if anyone wants more information on any of the stuff I just talked about, please feel free to contact me or JJ, or actually anybody at KPI here. You'll see our contact information at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, at the end of the presentation, JJ will have a question and answer session. So please just hold your questions till the end. And like right now, I'd like to turn it over to JJ. JJ?
Thanks, Brian. I'd like to welcome everyone to leveraging your Hyperion environment with Oracle Data Integrator. On today's agenda, I'm really going to talk about what Oracle Data Integrator is and how it fits in your EPM environment. And then I'd like to discuss a few key benefits of ODI, and then also some limitations of ODI. ODI is a fairly relatively new product in the EPM space, and I'd like to talk about the benefits and the limitations. And then also, I'd like to talk about the different scenarios where you would use ODI in the EPM real world. And then I'd like to talk about the different tools that are in ODI. I mean, ODI is very modular, so there are a lot of different tools to use, and I'd like to explain some of the key benefits and kind of the order in order to leverage these tools. And I'd like to talk about an enhanced ODI scenario that's more of a Sarbanes-Oxley compliant architecture. So I'd like to discuss how I leveraged our non-SOX architecture and made it SOX compliant, some of the tools that are in ODI. And then concluding the presentation, there's going to be a question and answer session. So really, what is ODI? An ODI is a scalable, high-performance metadata and data loading tool that you can use to load into your Oracle EPM applications. You can use it to load into Hyperion planning. You can use it to load into Hyperion Space, and you can use it to load into HFM. ODI saves you time and money by eliminating hard-coding values. You can use a tool. It has a graphical interface, and it will allow you to connect to multiple sources. And then during this presentation, you're going to learn how to architect your ODI solution efficiently and effectively. And then in conclusion, you're going to have a few examples of different architectures, a day-to-day architecture that can be used at any site, in any ODI and EPM implementation, and then a SOX compliant example. And so you'll be able to see the differences between the two and actually see the benefits of ODI itself and the flexibility and its capabilities. So really what ODI is, it's a basic ETL tool. ODI was around before Hyperion Space and before Hyperion planning in terms of loading data. It's a standalone ETL tool. So some of the great functions that Oracle has added to it is the ability to load into Hyperion Financial Management, Hyperion Planning, and Hyperion Space. Create metadata. We can extract metadata. We can extract dimensions. We can load data. We can load dimensions into any and multiple cubes. And then the nice thing about it is that it's free with a lot of the Oracle Hyperion Planning licensing agreements. And so in terms of leveraging ODI, I really recommend using ODI in the sense that this is a tool that Oracle is going to be using going forward. And so there's going to be a lot of support, and there's going to be a lot of help, and then there's going to be a lot of enhanced functionality that's going to be coming out of this tool. And what this next slide is doing is it's doing a comparison of some common metadata and data loading tools. And I just want to show that ODI can do all the things that EPMA can do, SDM can do, and some of the older tools such as HAL and Informatica or DIM. So we can build dimensions, we can load data, we can connect to multiple environments. I mean, really the key thing is connecting to multiple source data through a single interface. ODI can connect to multiple databases, flat files, all through a single interface. It can connect to planning applications. And the key thing with ODI is that it is mainly an IT tool. And so in order to leverage ODI appropriately, you want to make sure that you have some of the IT background or some of the relational background or some of the ETL background at your particular implementation. And this next slide here is the my example of a typical EPMA data architecture. You can see on the left here our source systems. We have multiple source systems. We have, for example, an Oracle HR system, a recruiting system, a GL system, and a data warehouse. And you can see we have just separate systems. They all don't have to be Oracle. A lot of them, our recruiting system could be on SQL Server. Our data warehouse could be on DB2. And you can see here that we're going to need different software. This ETL layer is where really ODI fits in terms of the EPMA data architecture. In this ETL layer, you can see that we can take data from multiple sources and then load data into multiple S-based and planning cubes through a single interface. And this is where, again, there are multiple ETL tools, but in terms of the strategic tool that Oracle is using moving forward in terms of integrating with EPM applications, it's going to be ODI, and this is the tool that I recommend to use. In terms of data architecture and why you would use these tools, I mean, data quality. I mean, not all of your source systems are going to have clean data. You can use ODI to clean up that data. Metadata changes. I mean, you can pick up your metadata from the data warehouse and use ODI to manage those metadata changes. And in terms of logging and being able to version, ODI I'm going to discuss a little further in the presentation, but ODI can do all that. Can log all your transactions, can create different versions, and can really connect to multiple Hyperion applications and multiple data sources through a single interface, and can be packaged up to make a very, very streamlined solution. So again, just to go over some of the key benefits of ODI, it's high performance. It's an enterprise level ETL tool. So in terms of loading data, it can handle a lot of data. It can handle a lot of different functions outside of your normal loading into an EPM environment or an S-based queue. It scales to your existing sources and any other new sources that you're going to have in the future. You'll be able to add new sources because they're going to continue to add different adapters, add different drivers for this product. I mean, it is the Oracle strategic tool moving forward. And so this is you really want to fall in line in terms of getting that level of support from Oracle and getting that knowledge base. The more people use the particular tool, the more information that's going to be out there, and the more help that you can get from even the end user community. I'm seeing a lot of activity on the different Oracle forums in terms of different people asking ODI questions, migrating their DIM implementations to ODI, migrating their HAL implementations to ODI. So it's really a good tool in terms of moving forward, getting your architecture in line with what Oracle's recommending. And then some other nice features is that you can package things up together. So we can extract data from our data warehouse. We can extract metadata from our data warehouse. We can load that into Hyperion planning. And then also we can execute different S-based calculations and scripts through ODI. So we can do all that. We can do a lot of checks and balances that a lot of ETL tools do. We can export our extract of data, and then we can leverage that extract to tie to our S-based application. So you can have multiple sources. You can have multiple different ways of logging. And then some of the limitations of ODI is that it's an IT-managed tool. And so if your implementation is more business-focused, it might be a little bit too ETL-driven for you. So and there's also a lot of overhead. There is a considerable amount of overhead with ODI. So if you have a smaller implementation, ODI might not be the tool for you. But in terms of moving forward and to meet some scalability requirements, it's really not a bad idea to just go ahead and convert some of your things into ODI. And then another factor is that the data integration tools that are being used with EPM architecture today, I mean, it's constantly changing. We've transitioned from using HAL to using DIM to using there's FDM, there's EPMA, there's a lot of different tools. So it's just another tool set to learn. So it's just that ramp up time is there. So now we're going to really get into the internal workings of ODI. How does ODI work in terms of how does it get its job done? So there's a client portion to ODI. It's installed on the server and installed on the client. It can be installed on a particular computer. So or your developers' computers, that is. And then from there, the developers will work on this ODI client. Data will get sent to a master repository. So this master repository will hold most of your code. Will hold a lot of aspects in terms of your designer, your topology, and your security. So a lot of this goes into the master repository. And the master repository is key because this is where you can migrate things from dev, test, and production. There's also an agent component to the ODI backend architecture. The agent actually schedules tasks and runs tasks from different servers for you. And then you can see that from the agent, this is where you can connect and load into Essbase and planning and load metadata into planning. So now that we know how the back-end architecture works, I just want to walk through a few real-world scenarios that I faced. These are different implementations that I've been at and where I've used ODI to meet FP&A requirements in terms of loading data from multiple sources and loading metadata from multiple sources and then packaging it up into a streamlined process. And so I've talked about loading metadata from a data warehouse to build a planning application. That's probably one of your most typical requirements in the EPM architecture. Loading data from a general ledger and loading it to an ASO. So we're going to use ODI to load from a GL into an ASO. Another requirement is loading data from a data warehouse and loading that into a BSO. So we're going to talk about how we're going to load data from a data warehouse into a BSO using ODI. And then the final requirement is to load data from an HR and general ledger and load that data into workforce planning. So how does ODI solve all these problems, and what tools in ODI would you use to solve these problems? So the solutions that I've come up with is that I've created interfaces that have loaded into planning metadata from a data warehouse. I've also created interfaces that loaded data from multiple sources into different types of both types of Essbase cubes, both in ASO and BSO. I've packaged up the metadata load and the data load package into a scenario that gets loaded nightly, automated. And so we're automating a metadata load and a data load into a single interface that can get scheduled nightly and that can get calculated. And really, that's the key thing. I mean, through a single interface, you can manage your metadata, you can manage your data loads, you can manage a lot of your calculation scripts, and then you can also run some Maxell to rebuild partitions, run some of your nightly cleanup jobs that you do in Essbase. So really, this is a really powerful tool in terms of combining all of those data integration aspects and maintenance aspects and scheduled aspects into a single tool. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the tool itself, some of the different components of the tool, and kind of really the order that you should really look at things and how each module within ODI works. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on kind of what to look out for and how to set things up, some best practices in terms of setting up your connections and setting up your designer and using your topology manager. So there are three main tools in ODI. The topology manager, which is used to manage your physical and logical data sources and targets. So this is where you're going to create your connections to your different relational databases. You're going to create your connections to your different flat files. You're going to create your different connections to your planning applications, to your Essbase applications, and to your HFM applications. The designer is where you're actually going to do a lot of your development. This is where most people spend most of their time working with ODI, is in the designer. And then the operator. The operator is used to execute data load packages and to track executions of data load packages and to track and hold scenarios. So now just to delve a little deeper into Topology Manager, and here are some tips and tricks that I found out. And some key features to really look out for when you're using Topology Manager is to really organize and configure all your drivers beforehand. So get all your drivers from the Oracle download site, download them all, and make sure they're in the right spots so that you have all your data sources ready and you have all the necessary drivers for your data sources and your target. And the next step would be to create a physical architecture. And the physical architecture in ODI is key because it actually contains your server connections. This is where you can test your server connections, your different logins, and the different drivers you use for connectivity. So this combines all your drivers, your logins, and your server information to make sure you can connect and to actually give the physical connection. So this is a server name, this is an IP address, this is a port level information that you're creating in your physical architecture. The next step is actually to create your logical architecture. And the logical architecture is actually just, I kind of put it as a variable or a name that you can transfer for that particular source. So I can have multiple different S-space cubes, one for workforce planning, one for CapEx planning, and then I can create a logical architecture called workforce and CapEx. And so you're not always having to reference full-on server names and very, very long IDs. And this is key actually in importing your design, your architecture across environments. So moving from dev, test, and production, it's key to having the same logical architectures for all of your similar applications. And in the SOX compliance scenario, I'll go through that and explain that in a little bit more detail. So now we're going to talk about the designer. And again, the designer is used to create your source and targets. This is where you're going to do a lot of your development, and this is where you're going to do all of your building. So some of the key aspects in designer is the ability to create models. And what ODI uses models for is to define your data structure in your data sources and your application targets. And so this is where you're going to create your different columns to load data into. This is where you're going to create your different fields that you're going to have available from your sources to load data into. This is really the first step in connecting to your source and connecting to your target. And what ODI does is it actually reverses a lot of the data structures for you, so you don't have to create those fields manually, especially if you have very, very big data warehouses where you have a lot of architecture that you're already just really pulling off of. What you can do is you can reverse and read off of that data warehouse, so you're not having to recreate all of your all the fields that you need. And then the next thing is knowledge modules. Knowledge modules are really key because this is where you're actually loading data and creating the integration between your source and your target. So the knowledge module connects your sources and your targets together. So this is where you can load data into planning, S-Base, and HFM, and this is actually packaged code. So Oracle will provide you different knowledge modules. As you get better in developing ODI, you can create your own knowledge modules, be able to create much more complex tests. So the idea of the knowledge module is actually to package up some code so that to create data integration points. And I really think that the ability to create your own and the ability to edit, pre-built knowledge modules is key, because then you can expand on what has already been created by Oracle for S-Base and for planning HFM. And here are a few more tips in terms of the designer. Next thing to really focus on is interfaces. And what are interfaces? Interfaces actually combine your data sources and your data targets. So this is the canvas, so to speak, that you're going to be working on. You're going to take your models and you're going to put them in an interface. And the interface actually has different sections for your targets and for your sources. And so you will draw the simple drag and drop of your models, your source model and your target model, into an interface, and it's a graphical interface. It's very, very, in my opinion, very intuitive to use. And so this is where you're going to have the ability to log errors and to load data and to execute calculation scripts, and to really, you can also refresh planning from an interface. And so there are different tools provided by the knowledge module that allows you to do different things in the interface. And then the next thing is packages. And packages really bring all of your different interfaces together so that you can combine them into one standard task. An example I used above, we are loading metadata from a data warehouse into a planning application. We're loading data from multiple sources into both ASO and VSO cubes. We're loading into workforce planning application. We want to calculate that database. We want to refresh a partition. In the package, you can do all this. You can combine all of your information, and it can be run on demand, or it can run on a scheduled task. So this is really a powerful tool in terms of just bringing all of your different aspects together into a package, funny enough, solution. And then the final tool I want to talk about in terms of ODI is the operator. The operator is used to execute data load packages and to track data load packages. And so what you can do is after you create a package, you can create a scenario so that that package cannot be edited, and it's in basically execution only mode. And so you can execute these packages or these scenarios from the operator. And then what the operator will do is will actually show all the steps, show all the successful completions, and then we'll also show any errors that you've encountered. It also has the ability, this is where you're going to schedule a lot of your tasks also. So the operator has an agent where you can schedule your tasks and bring everything together. So just to review our solution, our typical scenario is that in order to meet metadata and data loading requirements, we've created an interface for planning metadata. We've created an interface for S-based data loading into S-based. We've packaged all of that metadata and data loading interfaces together into a scenario that can now be scheduled. And then also we've added the ability to execute calculations. We've added the ability to run, max cell scripts directly through ODI. And so this is your typical ODI solution will include most or all of these different aspects. So I just want to transition a little bit into Sarbanes-Oxley and just kind of give a quick overview of what Sarbanes-Oxley is and how it impacts IT, and then and really what to do if your project actually or your particular implementation needs to become SOX compliant. What tools are out there? So what Sarbanes-Oxley is in 2002, everyone I think is pretty much aware of some of the fraudulent activity that occurred, and so the SEC has created some regulations around different protocols around maintaining electronic records and making sure that all reports and all documentation submitted to the SEC follows some certain regulations and there are certain standard practices. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about enhancing your ODI scenario for SOX compliance and how to really make that typical scenario and then take that to the next level, make your typical scenario SOX compliant. Your typical scenario that described above will have maybe one or two, a dev, and then the production environment. Most of the time, my clients have a production environment they're using, and really, especially if you don't have to fall under SOX, then really that's where you're doing a lot of your development. So you're going from a single server solution to now, if you want to become SOX compliant, you're going to really have to have one or two or three different servers so that you can move up the chain and migrate changes and make sure that any change that occurs in your code is tracked. Developers will typically no longer have access to production, so you cannot develop directly in production. And SOX requirements also have to go through a lot of change management. There's a lot of promotion of code. There's a lot of validation of code. There's a lot of unit testing, and there's a lot of user acceptance testing that goes on around SOX. And then typically I've seen a lot of production control teams. So a production control team will basically not have access to development, and their sole job is to migrate code from dev test to production. And then the final SOX requirement that I continually face is evidence that everything is successfully executed. So how do I know that you loaded data yesterday at 5 p.m.? And how do I know that it was successful? And so these are the typical requirements you're going to see in SOX. Okay, so how does ODI solve those SOX problems? There's a tool called ODI versioning. And in ODI, you can version different, basically anything. You can version your interfaces, you can version your packages, and you can version your scenarios so that you can track all the different iterations of code. Another thing, how do we migrate objects between environments? So the use of scenarios, you can migrate objects, from dev to test to production. And then also the final component is, how do I know that all of my executions have completed successfully? There is an ODI operator. There's a log that you can use that'll track all the different executions that will store that information, and it can be exported and provided to your auditors to make sure that your executions have completed successfully and that any errors are being tracked. So I want to talk about the first SOX requirement. Developers must track all changes. And so ODI has a lot of really cool pre-built tools that you can use so you can track all your different changes. And this is just to describe a typical scenario. In a free SOX world, how do I track a change? I'll receive an email in my inbox, and I'll send and I'll just reply to that email saying that, yes, I made the change and it's working. Or I'll get a call saying, I need to add this new account to my planning application. Can you add that account? When I'm done with the code, I'll typically just send that through, calling back and saying that it's done. Post SOX, what I really recommend using is ODI versioning, and so you can version different packages, interfaces, and procedures so that you have that log in the system and you're not tracking things externally, in an email, in a phone call conversation, in an instant message. These things are documented in the system and can be easily accessed. So, ODI versioning is pretty basic in terms of the way it works. It's basically a save as. And the really nice thing is that you can continually save as and version your code, and then you have the ability to restore different versions. It gives you a lot of and then also you can also compare different versions, and so you can compare, version 1, version 2, and actually see exactly where it changed. In the screen here, you can see what's new, what's old, what's been deleted. It does a really pretty good job of maintaining that for you within the system. And then another really important requirement for SOX is that developers will not have access to production, and they can't code directly in production. And so we're going to have to use a migration path. So we're going to have to run code or create code in development, test the code in the test environment, and then migrate. Once that code has been fully tested, migrate that code into production, and the developer cannot really have access to any environment outside of your development environment. And then in this solution, we're going to leverage a production control team so that they will migrate the code from dev to test, and then from test to production. And so really, if you have a really simple install of ODI, or a simple, in our typical scenario, we only had one environment. And so we really coded in our production environment, really never migrated from dev, test, and production. So post-SOX, what we really need to do is we really need to change our architecture. We need to create a development repository, and then we need to from this development and repository, we need to generate our scenarios. And then test and production will be execution-only repositories. So we'll migrate these scenarios, or basically packaged up code, up to test, up to production, and then we'll execute them in production. And there's going to be no development. There will be no designer in dev or in test and production, so that you can't even you won't even have the possibility of editing your code in test and production. So the only edits you can make is in development. So just to explain this architecture, our development environment's only going to have designer and operator and full development access. So the developer will be able to create the code, will be able to execute the code in a controlled environment, in a development environment, and from there, once the code has been approved and unit tested, what you can do is generate scenarios. And so the scenarios is what production control team is going to transfer from test to production. And the key point in this architecture is that all of your logical schemas and logical agents need to be defined the same across the board. So for example, if I have a workforce planning cube in dev, in test, and production, my logical schema for that application has to be workforce planning. Just keep it generic, or W. Just keep it the same across your different environments. And so what ODI does is that using this logical schema, it actually ties any physical architecture in that particular environment to the logical schema. So you're not continually having to edit your connections as you move things from dev, test to production. And really, this is a powerful feature in the sense that you can load test data, you can load production data without ever having to physically change your connections in those environments, and it actually eases the migration path. So just to show that in a diagram here, we're going to start from the bottom up. You can see that in the development area, there's the ODI client. You're going to have designer. You're going to have operator. And then moving up the chain, when we get to this yellow area, you're not going to see the developer client. You're going to export an ODI scenario, and you're only going to see execution, the ability to execute that scenario. And so if it passes user acceptance, then we can move it up to production. But if it doesn't and it fails user acceptance, what we can do is you cannot make any changes in tests. You're going to have to roll that back and bring it back into the development area to make those changes. So from a SOX compliance standpoint, developers will not have access to tests, to production, to make any changes, so you can track all the changes that you're making in the development environment. Again, leveraging the logical schemas, make sure your logical schemas are defined the same, and you shouldn't have too many issues migrating this code from dev, test to production. And the final SOX requirement is having the ability to document all your data loads and making sure all of it executed successfully. ODI has the operator portion of the tool that actually does this for you. And so pre-SOX method, again, I sent an email saying that it executed successfully. I called them up saying it worked great. Post-SOX, you can send them the log documenting that ODI ran your data load at 5 o'clock and completed with no errors. So there's really no question as to what data got loaded and to what, if there were any errors, in the successful completion of a data or metadata update. And this is just a quick screenshot of the different, you can see here in green the different successful executions of scenarios, and the ability to track, historical executions as well. So just to review our SOX compliant ODI solution, we're using ODI versioning to control change management. ODI has a tool built in where you can save as, you can compare different iterations of code. ODI does a great job of being able to migrate things easily from dev, test to prod when set up correctly. So making sure your logical schemas are set up the same. Your physical architecture can be different. So you can easily migrate things from dev, test to prod and really save yourself the hassle of being able explaining why your developers have access to production to your auditors. So you can completely take your developers, move them out of production, and just leverage the migration abilities of ODI. And then the final portion is be able to again track all your executions, send the data log out, making sure that all of your data loads and metadata loads have completed successfully without errors. And that really completes the presentation portion. Now I'm going to open it up to questions. So to ask a question, go to View, go to the chat box, and then select my name, and you'll be able to chat me a question. And really, so I'll give everyone a second to ask a few questions. And really, some of the common questions that I face are, what relational databases have you connected to? I've really connected to multiple data sources. I've connected to Oracle database sources, DB2 database sources, SQL Server sources, and ODI is really flexible in terms of just coming up with the different drivers. And so if you have a driver for it, and you can look it up in the ODI forums, or you can look it up in the ODI website, you'll be able to pull data from it. So I have a question here. Can it extract data from Excel or a CSV or Access? Yes. It does a great job of extracting data from text files. So if you're not necessarily going after data from a relational database, and you have multiple data sources, you can do the same exact thing. So you can create a model for each data file, and you can connect to that data file and use that data file as a source. So if you don't have a very, very involved, complex solution, you can still leverage ODI, connect to different data files. Or if you don't have access to the data directly and you're receiving a flat file from someone, ODI does a good job of reversing a text file and creating a model for you. Hence, you're able to use it in an interface. Let's give it a second for a few more questions. But again, I really, really like using. The tool is a really powerful tool. Again, they're going to continue to expand on using ODI. And then I have a question here. Do you have a checklist or a cheat sheet that shows the high-level steps for the configuration to create interfaces and packages? Really, if you walk through my presentation, the different aspects that are the different key features in each of the different areas. So, for example, I walk through creating physical and logical architecture in the topology section. I walk through creating a model. I've walked through creating an interface, and I've walked through creating a package. This is the order that you want to create things in. So this is kind of a high-level process. And so that if you go back through my presentation, you're going to see the different order, and that'll give you the high-level steps in terms of where to look and in what order to look. I think that, and that'll do a good job of kind of getting people started. And another question I have is ODI similar to Informatica? Yeah. Before using ODI, I was developing this same exact stuff in DIM. So it's really just, it's similar to DIM in the fact that you can connect and it's graphical and it's a powerful ETL tool. The learning curve for myself really wasn't that huge. I was able to pick up using ODI fairly easily. If you know one ETL tool, you can pretty easily translate a lot of that information to using ODI. And then I have a question about how this integrates with EIS or Essbase Studio. EIS and Essbase Studio provides a little bit different functionality in the sense that if you want to be able to drill directly back into your relational source, you might want to go the EIS or the Essbase Studio route. Currently, I am not fully aware of a knowledge module that can drill directly back into ODI using native Essbase. So again, I mean, because they're using knowledge modules, not to say that they might not develop one, or there isn't one out there that was custom built. Again, I would like to thank everybody for their time. And again, if you have any questions or just want to clarify some things that I went over during my presentation, my information is on the screen here. So don't hesitate to give me a call or send me an email. I'll be glad to help anybody out.